undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the university welcomes back today to its 44th commencement exercises members of the 40th, 35th, 30th, and 25th alumni reunion classes. Will the members of the reunion classes of 1955, 1960, 1965, and 1970 please stand and be recognized? The university expresses its profound gratitude to those members of the faculty who now become professors emeriti. Will the Grand Marshal, Dr. Harold I. Levine, Professor of Mathematics, please stand and be recognized? Brandeis University is to recognize and acknowledge excellence in teaching. This year's recipient of the Louis Dembitz Brandeis Prize for Excellence in Teaching is Dr. John Davies Burt, Associate Professor of English. This year's recipient of the Michael L. Walzer Brandeis Class of 1956 Award for Teaching is Dr. Neil Simister, Assistant of Molecular Immunology and Rosenstiel Basic Medical Sciences Research Center. Mr. Louis Perlmutter, Brandeis Class of 1956 and Chairman of the Board of Trustees, will bring greetings.
President Reinhardt's fellow trustees, distinguished guests, members of the class of 1995, I say that line every year. Sometimes there's silence and sometimes there's great cheers. This class has great spirit. That's terrific. Parents and friends, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, I welcome you to the 44th commencement exercises of Brandeis University. I also extend a special welcome to our distinguished honorary degree recipients and to the many friends of the university who are here to celebrate this splendid occasion. The trustees join me in extending our congratulations to the members of the class of 1995. Today, in our society, it is easy to become discouraged by problems we read about and hear about daily. The problems are real, creating a sense of crisis, a lack of direction, economic concern, fear of violence. The dominant condition in our society is uncertainty. I agree that it is important to take a realistic look at the world. However, you should be excited that you are graduating at a time of unprecedented promise, a time of explosion of global trade and economic growth, of new democracies from the Baltics to Africa. While you will face no shortages of challenges, I submit that as you prepare for the 21st century, this is the greatest time in history to be alive. If the right choices are made, the right decisions taken, you will be living in a world at a time of explosive worldwide growth and unprecedented prosperity marked by the triumph of personal, individual liberty. How do you, graduating today, respond to reality? What I know is that to realize this potential, the world needs you and the best you have to offer. Whether your field will be economics, education, the arts, religion, the law, science, medicine, public service, the world needs your input, your ideas, your hard work, your independent judgment for you to develop to your full potential. The Brandeis experience has given you the intellectual training to find your own individual way, never to stop learning, to continue to grow and develop. The Brandeis ethic will compel you to contribute to your profession, your community, your country. As you graduate today and look forward to your future, so is Brandeis looking forward to the next century. I graduated from Brandeis in 1956, joined the Board of Trustees in 1984, and since 1989 have had the privilege of serving as chairperson. Two things strike me. When you are part of an institution for a long time, you have the fascinating experience of seeing generation succeed generation. It makes one conscious not only of being part of a stream of extraordinary accomplishments, but of holding the institution in trust for those before and those to follow. And second, how much Brandeis has changed over this period of time. We live in an age of enormous change. Everyone thinks about it, writes about it, analyzes the consequences. Most institutions just try to keep up. What about Brandeis? We take great pride in the monumental accomplishments of Brandeis in its short 47 years, but we know that the world is changing and the market in which we compete is changing. We are competing for a shrinking piece of the pie. The status quo is not acceptable. We have always been ahead of the curve, always been innovative. You graduating seniors know that Brandeis 2000 effort, the administration is working in partnership with the faculty and trustees to address these issues. You know that your university is responding vigorously and thoughtfully, holding discussions with faculty, students, and administrators. We are looking at our institutional strategies and performances honestly, objectively, and actively. We will make tough decisions and establish clear priorities for the finite resources available. We will strive to achieve the right balance between the imperative of change and the obligations of continuity. Academic institution, real change comes from building consensus. As I leave the chairmanship of the board, I want to assure the class of 1995 and the entire Brandeis constituency that while I can't predict the outcome of this process, I am confident it will enable your university to continue to be one of the world's finest universities in the new century. This is why I endorse without reservation the work that's being done and welcome the opportunity to face our challenges. Stay tuned, keep involved, and by all means, give us your input. Today's graduation ceremony is ultimately what Brandeis is all about. You young people graduating are among the best educated in the world. You are tomorrow's educators, scholars, and leaders. You are our future. I know you are up to the challenge. Good luck on your way, and may God bless you and all of us.
This year, the valedictory addresses will be delivered by Michael J. Sugar, candidate for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, magna cum laude, and Mary Beth Ladeau, candidate for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in the History of American Civilization.
Everybody, thanks for the enormous reception when I walked in, and I'd like to thank the press for coming too. I'm thrilled and I'm flattered. I'd also like to take this opportunity to express how grateful I am to be here representing you, the class of 1995. It is for me the culmination of an important journey, one which began 4 years ago when I arrived here as a fearful and unsuspecting freshman. I was incurably worried about the unfamiliar load, apprehensive about whether or not I'd be able to communicate with my Spanish-speaking, rugby-playing, tequila-shooting roommate, Jose. And feeling a bit nervous about something called Playfair, since every upperclassman I met told me I needed clean underwear. Needless to say, it took me a little while to get adjusted to this new place. I told my parents I needed some time to find myself before I could decide just what exactly it was I wanted to study. My father said, "Michael, you have 6 months to find yourself or else get lost." So I befriended the shopping period, and I hopped from class to class in hopes of finding a major I could call my own. I started with philosophy. See, I figured there was a big market for philosophers now that Plato was gone. But philosophy was too theoretical, and I tried economics, but that was too hypothetical. Neuroscience gave me a headache, and history repeats itself, so why should I bother studying it? I even tried French, but it was all Greek to me. But I thought I found my calling when I enrolled myself in a theater arts class. The only problem was I found all too quickly that I'm deathly afraid of doing anything in front of large groups of people. I even tried peace and conflict studies, but I couldn't get along with my professor. So I decided to give English a chance. My only hesitation was that I'd be wasting my parents' tuition money since I already talked good. But what? It turned out pretty well, though, and it was in my freshman English class that I heard for the first time the ineffable phrase, "Life is our dictionary." Life is our dictionary. A gentleman by the name of Ralph Waldo Emerson, a great thinker and, incidentally, a cure for collegiate insomnia, spoke those words to a group of Harvard University graduates, not at all unlike ourselves, about 150 years ago. If life is our dictionary, one clever student remarked, why do we spend so much time using Webster's? But the answer was clear. They had a lot more to learn, and so do we. Of course, the diplomas we might receive eventually in the mail, well, they signify our successful completion of Brandeis's rigorous curriculum. We survived humanities, writing seminars, a few science courses, well, for some, a few hundred science courses, and accomplished the very goal we set out to achieve when we arrived here 4 years ago. But our education permeates the boundaries of academia, and there is a greater course offered by Brandeis University. It is one which you cannot find in the bulletin or even upon the desk of our most helpful and friendly registrar. There is far more to our education, and this course begins today. It's not surprising, then, that tradition declares this day to be commencement rather than graduation. After all, it is on this day that we are given the chance to commence, start again, and it is our responsibility to take that chance seriously. We now have the tools we need to build our futures, but the task at hand is great. Our education will provide the foundations we need, but we must embark upon a lifelong love affair with learning. We must derive from each endeavor and from every experience a new wisdom, and with each passing day, solidify our identities as leaders and role models, no matter which diverse path we may choose to follow or to create. This day is marked by more than celebration. For many of us, it will signify our entry into the real world and our readiness to find success in one form or another. For others, it is the most frightening day of our lives. For those who know not what lies ahead and find themselves more confused today than when they arrived here, I offer this piece of advice. If you are utterly and completely confused, Brandeis has succeeded. I mean it. Socrates wrote, "I know enough to know that I know nothing." To be confused is to be inquiring, and to be inquiring is to be active. Our actions must speak louder than words. They should resound throughout our lives, in our homes, our families, our everyday pursuits, and they should impact all those whom we encounter. This, my friends, is our responsibility. I'm not suggesting that each of us needs to be an outspoken community leader or politician, nor am I proposing that we organize rallies or petitions in support of one thing or another, or write best-selling novels which influence the way the world thinks. Rather, it is my feeling that each of us should play an integral role in whatever context we may find ourselves immersed, and we should do it deliberately. We are perceived by others in light of how we view ourselves, and these perceptions are measured only by our actions. Ours is a dynamic bunch, comprised of people from around the world with diverse political and economic backgrounds and unique values and beliefs. But we are bound cohesively by our desire and responsibility to bring effective change, however small or ambitious, to the things in life we hold sacred. We must never lose sight of this. If we do, then our education was nothing more than a waste of time. Instead, we must seize with clenched fists the spontaneity of life, extracting from it all the joys and successes as it may bring, but all the while remaining acutely aware of our responsibility not to take those things for granted. We have learned so that we may teach, and it is our example which will lead future generations. It's difficult to imagine where we'll all be a few years from now, or even tomorrow. In a few hours, we'll speed off to various destinations, and once we catch up on a few years of lost sleep, we'll begin our true journey into adulthood. We will no longer be students of Brandeis University, but part of its alumni. Wherever we may go, however, we will be forever linked by our experiences here. Some of these were jubilant, others tragic, but we endured and enjoyed them together, and these triumphs and tragedies have unified us as a class and as members of the Brandeis University community. Our commitment to Brandeis does not end here, because Brandeis has left its indelible mark on each of us. The community we have created is characterized by kindness, generosity, and occasionally even truth unto its innermost parts. In a sense, we too are the trustees of the university, as we will be viewed by all those whom we encounter as ambassadors of the ideals and beliefs which are instilled by Brandeis. We embody those precepts, and we should carry them with pride. This, my fellow classmates, is my charge to you. We must never stop learning, for to stop learning is to stop growing. We must make our lives essential, remembering that merely existing is not being truly alive. If you believe in something, stand up for it, and do others in your times of need. I mean, after all, people who need people keep your applause going while I fix the microphone. Well, they're the luckiest people in the world, as we all know. So I guess I should tell you that things worked out pretty well for me in the end. I was quite able to communicate with my roommate, Jose. I chose a major, and it wasn't English, surprisingly. And nobody saw my underwear, at least not without my permission. So, I just wanted to tell you that the words of Emerson have pervaded my experiences here. Life is indeed our dictionary. And with my warmest wishes to the class of 1995, I remind you, you will make your living by what you get, but you will make your life by what you give. I couldn't be more proud to be a part of this most special class. Friends, family, honored guests, I give you Brandeis University's class of 1995.
President Reinhardt, distinguished guests, faculty, fellow graduates, and friends. Among the many role models for new graduates, I confess to having a favorite. I can see it clearly. It is the spring of 1846. Fresh from law school, Francis Parkman sets out from Boston for the wilderness west of the Mississippi. He is 23 years old, yet to write any of his great histories of North America, and determined not to become what he called a ripe scholar, the products of whose mind, he wrote, were as pallid as the hue of his face, and like their parent, void of blood, bone, sinew, muscle, and marrow. So off he goes, down the dusty trail on a prolonged field trip to sleep in mud, suffer mosquitoes, exposure, dysentery, in order, he professed, to understand the character and usages of the remote Indian nations. Now, as a 20th century female historian, cautioned to hold suspect the great white males of the 19th century, I have tried to take this role model from my mind. Parkman is far from ideal, a racist patrician snob whose histories sometimes sacrifice complexity for the sake of a riveting narrative. Still, the image sticks, and I believe I know why. Parkman's journey combined the spark of his imagination with experience of the world. Here was a detached observer and practical adventurer, a thinker with sinew, muscle, and marrow, a writer with the power to educate and move his readers. What better goal for us, my fellow graduates, in our own postgraduate journeys? Are we well equipped for such a journey? Even the best schools can browbeat the imagination. It has long been rumored that an imagination, or its remnant, is what a new student leaves behind at the registrar's desk. Even if we escape unscathed, education and imagination do not always give us a sense of purpose or the passion of Francis Parkman. What are we supposed to imagine? What are our obligations to society? What gives our work sinew, muscle, and marrow, and makes our efforts meaningful in this world? These are difficult questions because the bonds of community are increasingly complicated and tenuous. Seldom in its history has American society been more strained and confused about its identity, or our common ground with citizens less firm. Never has our hunger for individual satisfaction so overtaken our acceptance of public and private responsibility. The ivory tower has become a political chuck wagon, lurching with shrill and tiresome showdowns over which of our cultural possessions must be tossed into the ditch before we reach Fort Laramie. But this is no ordinary chuck wagon. We are wired with speed and information. Parkman plods for weeks toward the Pacific. We skip in nanoseconds down the information highway. We are tempted to congratulate ourselves for having overcome ancient limitations of place, time, and obligation. Cyberspace, virtual reality, and gene therapy impress us with the apparent boundlessness of human cleverness. Trouble is, our hearts still plod, usually behind the tail of the horse in front of us. We can hope that some divine central casting agent will save us from living out our own cautionary tales, such as the one in which young Mr. Nicholas Leeson recently found himself in Singapore, an internet adventurer suddenly made ripe through his own delusions. In the slick and alluring world of computer manipulations lives a moral universe straight out of Dickens. But in such reminders lie the hopeful signs of our time, signs that collectively can remember in our moral failings or in satellite photographs of Earth. what it means to act with a sense of proportion, that sense of tininess and humility that once came from a horseback trip up the Oregon Trail. I was recently reminded of this while looking over my father's shoulder at a family photo album. There were pictures of me in pedal pushers, my brother in those black-framed 1960s eyeglasses that make one look like Woody Allen, frolicking with Montana's forests and mountains in the background, posing with a mess of trout on a stringer, standing with our feet, well, actually my brother's foot, there were limits to a little sister's rights, on a bear carcass, holding the ranger's gun in mock Daniel Boone prowess. Those were good years, my dad said with a sigh of nostalgia. Nobody talked about the environment. Heck, we didn't even know we were in the environment. We all laughed, but behind humor was the sobering recognition of human limitations. In his joke about the passing of our own Parkman-esque backcountry, my father caught perfectly the burden of knowledge that is the flip side of its exhilaration. We know things that no 19th century adventurer could know. At the same time, our fragmented technological society encourages us to forget what Parkman knew, that moral responsibilities and human frailties are long unchanged, and that knowledge of the past is essential to our future. As another great American writer, E.B. White, quipped upon visiting the futuristic 1939 World's Fair while suffering a sinus infection, "When you can't breathe through your nose, tomorrow seems strangely like the day before yesterday." Well, Francis Parkman did not entirely succeed in his effort to be the thinking adventurer. The trip west irreparably damaged his already fragile health and ended his days as a man of action. He became an historian. The past became his countryside. But a ripe scholar he never was. For him, as it must be for us, the vigor and clarity of his work was action. "In achievement, I expect to fail," he wrote in old age, "but I shall never recoil from endeavor." Thank you.
The chairman of the Board of Trustees will present the candidates for honorary degrees to the president of the university.
President Reinhardt's, by the enactment of Chapter 123 of the Acts of 1951, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, authorized Brandeis University to confer honorary degrees. I have the privilege to instruct you to confer the following honorary degrees upon these persons for their singular achievements.
Walter H. Annenberg. Walter H. Annenberg, distinguished diplomat, creative publisher, and visionary philanthropist, you have led a life marked by outstanding and singular accomplishments. A businessman with a Midas touch, you built a communications empire that revolutionized the media industry. Your benevolent hand has made you one of this century's most generous benefactors to hospitals, institutions of learning, and museums throughout this country and abroad. Your determination to reform public education, through the largest individual gift ever made to American learning, is unparalleled in our nation's history. Having served as ambassador to Great Britain, you are still affectionately called Mr. Ambassador by your associates and are one of the select few Americans granted an honorary knighthood by Queen Elizabeth II. Inspirational life and unsurpassed philanthropy, Brandeis salutes you, Mr. Ambassador.
Walter H. Hannon, by the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees of Brandeis University,